Everyone for taking the survey, I hope. If you didn't already, if you don't mind signing in with email, name and email, please. We have a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to kind of walk through this just quickly, how this session is going to work. We will go through the survey highlights and discussion. This will be all the quantitative data from the survey. The open-ended responses will be delivered next week. And then at 11:20 we'll take a 5-minute break, and I've got some snacks that I'll pull out. And then we will do, I'm just going to walk through the survey, and if you have any questions at any point, feel free to stop me and ask. And then we'll have the board kind of work through this SWOT exercise and establish some goals, vision statement, and priorities, and then we'll review next steps, and then we will have some time for questions and comments, excuse me. But feel free to stop me at any time. I'm just going to read this, but this land has been home to diverse communities for centuries and has seen many different versions of the community structure over time. We are incredibly fortunate to have such a rich and diverse cultural history that has contributed to the unique community we have today. The Fort Clark Springs we know today is an evolution of the native tribes that settled here long before the fort was established in 1852, the frontier fort and military occupations that evolved over the 18th and 19th centuries, the Brown and Root days operating as a guest ranch for visitors, the development of a private recreational and retirement community in 1971, and the Fort Clark Springs Association that has evolved over the past several decades. Not all of the history that this land and these communities have endured is pleasant, but it is real. If we are to move forward into the future as a community, we must work together to understand and learn from our history, the current state of affairs, and plan for the future. Oops. Okay, this is going to be, we may have some technical, it's a learning curve here, sorry. Okay. The association understands that there is significant work to do in reaching the potential of this community for today's membership. As we face aging infrastructure and facilities, significant operational and leadership changes over the past decade, changes in demographics of members, association finances, as well as broader challenges in the economic and political climate that the association and individual members face in the wake of the pandemic, the border crisis, and as a rural community. So to address these issues, it's critical to gather insight from the membership, establish goals, and develop a strategic plan to meet those goals. Without a strategic plan, a community will not know where it is going, much less if it ever got there. This will allow the board, management, and members to collaborate on initiatives that will enhance the quality of life for homeowners. This is all a critical step in developing the plan, community brand, and making thoughtful decisions for the benefit of the community. This will not happen overnight, but we can focus our efforts toward improving our shared community for the current membership and future of the Fort Clark Springs Association. Why do we need a survey? And I'll leave you with this for a moment. This is just an important part of gathering insight, part of a very preliminary phase of discovery and research. This will help gather all these insights for the board so that the association can establish goals and just develop a plan to act on. This is an important piece of this. All communities have a life cycle. So based on the survey and timeline and everything, this is sort of my best guess of where we are, and I'd be curious if anyone wants to just shout out where, looking at this, where you might think. So communities start, they're established, they grow, they sustain, and then over time they start to decline, and they either enter into a renewal phase or they dissolve and close. This is sort of a typical life cycle model. So would everyone agree, or would you have any other words?
I would disagree.
You would disagree?
You're way back before growth. When you realize you had 5,000 members 30 years ago and you have 1,800 now, not sustaining anything.
Well, so we're probably on the decline, right? Is that what it?
But you're declining back to before the growth space.
Yes. So in order to get back to that growth space, we would need to renew. And that is why this process is going to be so important, because there are a lot of the membership needs are changing. The resources have changed, the climate has changed, everything has gone through significant changes. And now is the time to really dig deep into what those changes are and make a plan to address them. So this is just another look at kind of that life cycle, growth, maturity, decline, and then it's either enter into rebirth or death. So this is a very pivotal moment for Fort Clark Springs and the association, which is why I think this is going to be a really valuable exercise and very important to the board and the membership moving forward and making plans and establishing some history, some baselines. And so as we move forward, we'll be able to refer back to this and track progress and growth. So quickly about the survey, just methodology and response rate. There are 1,241 individual members. He just said 1,800, but that was a different number. And we had 263 total responses. The goal for the response rate was 20%, which is the more than sufficient sample size, and that would have been 248. There was some concern about the members being represented fully, since it was a public survey and open to everyone. And we did get 95.8% of the responses were from current members. So that means the response rate for members was 20.3%. So 94.2 of the surveys were completed online, 5.8 were done on paper, which made for a fun typing situation. And I did sit at the office and set up a kiosk on Saturday, and people did bring in paper surveys, but did not do them in person. So the survey link was distributed starting November 19th through the dispatch email, social media, and an announcement at the November board meeting, which was published on YouTube. Hello.
Hello.
Flyers with the link distributed at the meeting in office. Hard copies were available at the office starting November 21st, and those responses were input manually. I was available at the admin office on December 3rd from 1 to 3 with an available kiosk for in-person completion. The original survey completion deadline was December 3rd, that Saturday, and then we went ahead and extended the deadline to December 5th, and we did get several, mostly paper, but some online surveys during that extended time as well. So this is just the kind of the meat of the survey, and I'm just going to talk through it, but again, stop me if y'all have any questions. This is just sort of this is the demographics of the responses. The largest section was age 65 to 74. I'm sure y'all can't read this one. If there's anything you want to clarify. Wider Caucasian was the majority ethnicity. What now?
They said, does that really matter?
I think it's good. It's always good to have an idea of the demographics of your community. Absolutely. What best represents your employment status? Retired was the biggest contingency here. And most people have 2 people living in the household. The largest response rate was from Unit 27, and then 25, 38, and 37 followed after that. There was a decent number of responses from people living off the fort, although they are largely members. And then here's the membership response. So about 16% have regular lot owning members, and then about 78 have residential memberships. about 3 have family recreational memberships, and then these 2 were not counted in the member response rate. So, but those were former members, or not a current member, or former member, but a visitor, or someone that has is interested in the future of Fort Clark. Let's see. Oops. Okay.
Annabelle, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Okay, is it common when you put, not you, but when you put out a survey, is 20% what most surveyors expect to get as a return?
That's more than substantial. So anything from 10 to 20 is pretty standard.
Did it exceed 20%?
Well, 20.5 for members. So
20.5 for members?
yes.
And then my next question is, how did the people that don't live on the fort, how did they get the survey? Did you?
Most of them are members that just don't live permanently on the fort. But it was circulated through the dispatch and through social media, and the flyer has been kind of just distributed as around town. And so it might have been people from Brackettville, it might have been members that have a vacation or second home here, or a lot, but just don't live here permanently.
Because I had a really difficult, I never got the link, you know, will you help me get it?
Yes.
I don't know what happened, but okay.
I'm not sure, I had 2, you and one other person had a hard time putting the link in, and I'm not sure if it was, I'm not sure what happened, but you did, you got it,
Yeah, you
right?
want me to
Okay,
resolve
okay,
it, it was
okay, okay,
fine.
Okay,
Took
good.
about 3 martinis.
I think you just needed a 4th. But,
I have a question.
Sure.
Does the fort have any demographics regarding like the current membership to compare your results to? Because I'm curious how a slice of 20%, how that actually translates to
No.
what 100% of respondents might be.
No,
so there's very little information, which again is sort of like, this is just hopefully gonna be somewhat of a baseline to work from in the future, but.
And I have one more question. Could you describe your methodology regarding the questions and length of the survey?
The length, we wanted it as open-ended as possible, so people didn't feel, contained to certain answers, but, and we wanted people to feel like they could really expand on feelings and sentiments. So, and then this was just a very comprehensive, given that there's really not any other information like this, we just wanted to try and cover as many bases as possible while still making it doable, although I do understand and appreciate the time commitment that it did take, because it was long.
Do you think that it was an inhibitor to people completing the survey? I know you reached your goal of 20%, but as passionate as people are about voicing their opinion about the fort, do you
I don't
believe
think it
that
was
the
an
length of
inhibitor.
survey-
I think that it was. I think that people understood that it was long, and it was frustrating to have to spend that much time on it. But I do think that people felt strongly enough that that was considered before, because we felt like people really wanted to weigh in and should weigh in on all of these things. So so that was considered, and I think that the majority of people were able to understood that it was going to be a time commitment and did it.
I personally took the survey. It took me multiple attempts to finish it just due to my schedule and kiddos and whatnot.
Right.
But I do know of 2 members who were unable to take the survey
Okay.
who would have had really great feedback, but due to the length, it stopped them from completing the survey.
Well, and I think this will be, again, this is a good sample size, and then we can move forward and have shorter, kind of, more frequent and more focused surveys to understand the trends moving forward. This, again, was just a completely kind of covering all the bases, but we can all obviously consider if we want to leave it open for longer, just to get kind of some residual answers for people that didn't have time, or that's
I think
something
the
we can-
follow-up surveys that are maybe more focused is a great idea, shorter,
Yeah.
easier to answer.
Yes,
Yeah.
A Reader Digest version.
yes, yes. Well, and we knew that going in, we knew that this was gonna be
Yeah.
long, but we felt sort of, given the timing and given the kind of urgency of some of these things, that, you know, it's better to have people just sort of sit down and try and focus and kind of cover all the bases rather than try to get, you know, one here and one there and,
Can I interject?
yes.
When we get the Concierge Plus, it'll allow us, when we finally get it up and running, it'll allow us to give surveys per unit and focus on different units. And that way you can give a more focused survey in those. So
Great.
And that's members only.
it will be anybody that's paying assessments to the fort, yes.
So the majority of responses own a home and live in the fort. These were the lot owners. I have family that lives on the fort. I own properties and rent. These are short-term and long-term. I'm a winter Texan. I own a home and visit. And then this was someone that rents a property here. Then how long have you owned property in Fort Clark Springs? So the largest group of respondents has owned property here from 11 to 20 years. Some great longevity. And then when you think about, so these are, again, kind of just the highlights, preliminary results. These will be delivered in different formats, but this, for this purpose, is just sort of a glance, a visual glance at the answers here. So this takes all of the words that were most used and puts them into this word cloud. So the historic, and these are by lines. So the first word that came to mind for people is these three. So you'll notice history and historic, quiet, peaceful, pool, home was the first word that came to mind for most people. The second word was peaceful, history, quiet, pool, wildlife, and then the third, wildlife, history, community, pool, friendly. So you'll notice that pool and history, peaceful and quiet come up in all of these. So that's it's nice to see visualized. So this starts the section of the board of directors. We've got an average rating of 2.8 out of 5 for satisfaction. And what does the board do really well? So meetings, trying, fort, members, good. There's obviously some things that I think can be improved and communicated, as you know, as with everything. And again, that's the purpose of this survey, is to see where the weaknesses are and what we can address.
I always have a question.
Good.
Okay, so when I answered that, I think I mentioned, I'm just referring to the current board. So if you do another survey next year, I think the whole thing might change. So I'm not really sure if that should have been included in the survey.
Well, I think it just, you know, I mean, it's helpful for the current board to understand just the general sentiment, and if there are things the current board can work on or address or discuss with members, and then also just an average, you know, to understand how different boards are received by membership, and
Oh, you should have
so.
been here years ago. Sorry.
Do we have a survey? But it is interesting to note, though, that in that, in that section, it's also interesting that how many board meetings have you attended in 2022? So the majority of people here have attended no board meetings. And second to that is 1 to 3 board meetings. And as we are in the 12th month, only 12% have attended 7 or more.
One thing that I think was missing from that question regarding how many board meetings you've attended was a response for how many board meetings have you watched online.
So that was on there.
But it wasn't on one of the questions, because I remember, because I had I've watched the board meetings online.
Okay.
And I remember reading that question and thinking, okay, this one's gonna be skewed a little bit because it's not allowing me to respond that I've actually been watching the board meetings, just not in person.
Okay,
But it was on a different question. So I think maybe
Okay.
it might be that one
Okay,
if you
maybe
don't
it's-
have a bar for people that have
okay,
watched online.
maybe it's,
I don't know, can you talk a little bit more about the big words on top? It's not listed in 1, 2, or 3, so, that one, there. Are you saying, what you're saying? or-
so like where you see the bigger sizes is
Mhm.
they were mentioned more frequently.
Okay,
So, and this one was just one section for response, so all of these words were used in response to this question, what does the board do really well? And so meetings looks like the biggest, trying looks like one of the biggest, which
Good.
just means it's been, repeated several times.
okay.
And then what is your level of engagement with board of directors, which is interesting because, you know, we have over here that about 45% of respondents have not attended any meetings. And then you've got about 11% that's their only, or their primary engagement with the board of directors. And then, but the primary response here was that the lot owners group, I followed the lot owners group on Facebook, which is worth noting that that Facebook group is not managed or,
It's independent.
yes.
It's independent of Fort Bend.
So, they do though also follow the Fort Facebook page and read dispatch emails, then read minutes and reach out to board members directly, and then get updates from friends and neighbors, and then about 12% acknowledge that they don't really engage. So, which is about the same as those that attend board meetings every month, which is sort of an interesting poll there. So this goes into the management. What does the Fort Clark staff, or Fort Clark Springs Association staff do really well, which again is the same concept. So these were all words that were repeated, and the larger ones were repeated with a higher frequency. So maintenance, friendly, staff, best, office, fort, tries, members. So that was a nice response. And these are just general ratings, 1 to 5 of different departments. So security is 3.2, maintenance 3.1, trash and brush pickup 3.4, road and bridge.
Recycling.
The what now?
Recycling, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
talking about recycling did real well.
Mm-hmm. Road and bridge 2.4, recycling did well 3.8. And then this goes into what are your main concerns about safety and security, and this is a little redundant, but it kind of served two purposes. But speeding and traffic was the main concern, followed by border issues and gate entry, burglary and theft, child safety, and vandalism. And then there is clearly a feeling that there is a specific problem with speeding, although some are unsure. And then, so while most of the members or the respondents feel as though they are meeting their individual responsibilities as a member, they would rate themselves 4.3. They rate their member benefits and value at a 2.7, so that's a pretty significant gap. Moving on to amenities. What would you consider to be the 3 most important amenities or offerings at Fort Clark Springs? Again, the same concept, although these are the 3 answers. So the top 2 lines is the first response, this is the second response, and these 3 lines are the third response. Again, recurring theme, which is not so surprising, but the pool, the trails, the golf, that all kind of shows up throughout the survey. And then this goes into some of the additional or individual amenities. So the airport had a 2.4 average rating. This is interesting as we go through this, just if you'll notice the difference between how important members think that the amenity is compared to how often or how infrequently they use the amenity. So I think that will provide some great discussion at least, and how we go about kind of getting amenities to be self-sustaining, if that is the goal, and where does that come from if members aren't using them but do value them. So that would be helpful. But so let's see.
I have a question.
Yes.
It was a little bit unclear to me on the star rating, and I had to go back and kind of decipher what you might have wanted us to respond to with a star rating. For example, is a star rating like how much we value that current amenity, or is the star rating what we perceive to be like the current state of that amenity? For example, if you're gonna go do a Google or a Yelp review and you're giving a star rating, was that what you were looking for?
Well, so it was meant to be sort of open-ended and just kind of a general starting point, and then leave it open, and there were additional spaces for additional comments so that people could really kind of detail their thoughts if they wanted to, and then the value of the amenity is the next question. So that gets a little bit more specific here. So the airport, the biggest group was neutral about the importance of the airport as an amenity, and most of the responses have never used the airport. The Health and Wellness Center, think it's very important or important, and then not quite as drastic as this, but the majority of respondents have never used the Health and Wellness Center, although their rating general rating is higher at 2.9. Let me make sure that is all on this page. Dickman Hall is a 3.3 average rating, and the majority of respondents think that this amenity, or Dickman Hall, is important as an amenity. They think it's important and very important, and most utilize Dickman Hall occasionally. Again, this will paint a broader picture and give a lot more detail when the open-ended responses are delivered, but in the interest of time, and in fact, there is a lot of information. So the full survey is about 300 pages. So I don't think anyone wants to sit through that today, but it will be delivered. Camping, 3.6. Most think it's important, although have never utilized the camping facilities. The pool, again, just as you might guess, most respondents think that it is a very important amenity and utilize it more frequently. And then, what do you think needs the most attention at the pool? The facilities was the biggest need here, followed by the spring flow and conservation. This is interesting. I mean, again, if we have another summer without water, that would be a concern. As our biggest and most important amenity, that would be a problem. The facilities, as you might guess, are of great concern. The grounds, the pool structure, lighting, which I believe is being addressed, and then hours, access, security, and parking are not as big of a concern. Golf, 2.7 average rating. How important do you think the golf is as an amenity? Most people think it's very important, and again, the majority never have utilized the golf facilities. So the pro shop, Creekside patio is closer, between occasionally utilizing and never utilizing. And then par 3, average rating is 2.4, and this kind of you know, the majority is neutral on whether or not this is an important amenity, and the rest kind of evens out there, and most respondents have never utilized the part 3.
Now I have another question. Okay, regarding the part 3, I mean, that's, I think he hasn't been doing anything for a couple of years. I was curious as why you included it.
Because it's there, and it's being, you know, there's action on it, and and also the or what I've noticed, especially in some of these these responses and the open-ended responses, is that it's sort of it's like Coca-Cola or something, you know, it's just a generic name. I think a lot of people refer to the parade ground or to that area as the par 3 and not just the par 3 course itself. So there's some kind of just semantics to acknowledge in that as well. But
Well, it's also visually what you see when you come on the fort, so whether it's utilized or not,
right, it makes it.
it's important.
Yeah.
If you walk it, you can't utilize it.
If what?
You see a
The
parade
flags
ground.
aren't there.
You see what?
There.
You only see a parade ground.
But you need the horses.
The horses?
Oh, we need the horses on the part 3.
Oh, yes, well, here we're talking about the stables. Unfortunately, most never use the stables, so we're maybe lacking in horses. But again, people it sort of evens out between neutral, important, and then the outliers are not important and very important. And then hunting, again, is one of those that, you know, the highest response rate was that the hunting program is very important, and most think it is important to very important. It's got a higher rating than many at 3.8. And then how often does someone in your household participate in the hunting program? Again, almost 80% have never participated in the hunting program. Disc golf also is there as a course, and most have never utilized, and
Of course, that's because right after it was put in is when it stopped getting irrigation and maintenance.
okay.
So, because when I answered that one myself, I was like, well, the utilization may have been higher if,
Well, and I think that's
I had
something
been-
to, like, you know, these kind of insights will be interesting in finding out some of the explanations and why that may have happened and considering that, so that is interesting.
Annabelle,
Yes.
to get specifics on why people think it's so important if they've never used it, is that something that'll come in a later, more specific survey? Is it like to find out if maybe it's because it's drawing revenue from outside, or?
There are some, that will be sort of summarized, and just as sort of general thoughts from the verbatim responses, but that wasn't a specific question, so there's not an actual segment that really digs into that specifically, but there are some common themes, and so that will be delivered, but again, and that, you know, as a part of later surveys, whether it's, you know, specific facilities or buildings or amenities or whatever it is, might be, you know, would be worth digging into the behavioral aspects of that more deeply. So this is interesting because it's sort of balanced, but later on, one of the most important amenities shows up very strongly and repeated in the tennis courts, needing attention. So I was surprised not to see that more very important. And then pickleball is something that people are talking about a lot. It's sort of a new trend, and I sort of expected it to be weighted more towards important or very important, but again, I think it's, you know, neutral, and I think it's just awareness, and also maybe not interested, but that may change as well as we kind of move forward. The trails, very important frequently. Average rating 4.3, so again, that just kind of verifies what we've seen in the open-ended responses and the words being represented. The fishing, 3.4 average rating, and sort of balanced. They're important, very important and neutral. But again, heavier towards never having gone fishing or occasionally. Are there additional amenities you'd like to see offered? Dining. By a lot. I was sort of surprised to see it that heavy there, but that's good to know. Reveille and Taps, business center with printer available for members, public Wi-Fi, community garden, more entertainment, more arts and cultural opportunities. What would you consider to be the 3 most important additions or changes to the amenities or offerings at Fort Clark Springs? So, again, the first 3 lines are the first answer, and the second 3 are the second, and the third, or those last 2 were the third response. Again, you'll see dining, dining options, pool, improve, restaurant, better maintenance, community garden, trails, amenities. Lots of common themes throughout, and I'm not sure that any of these are particularly surprising, but it is good to have a baseline for these as we move forward and see how they change. So the aesthetics and the grounds, please rate how satisfied are you overall with the appearance of the common grounds and landscaping. So the majority here, about 34%, is dissatisfied. About 22 is neutral, 22 satisfied, and then 18 very dissatisfied, and about 3 is very satisfied. Are you concerned about any of the following issues at the Adult Center? And this was sort of just a glimpse at what some of these issues are, because I think that there's a lot of just, people just don't understand what some of these issues at some of these buildings are and what they need attention and how much attention they need. But, and so in the commentary, people were saying that they didn't realize that there, was an asbestos problem, and so I think that's going to be interesting to figure out where the information needs to be communicated more strongly, if that's a concern. So the interior appearance, maintenance, cleanliness, asbestos remediation, all important. This was interesting about the facility rental rates. Except for the service club, everyone felt that the rental rates were too high. The service club is $400, post theater $325, commissary $650, amphitheater $325, the arbor $175, the gazebo $125, boardroom $175, swim park pavilion $275, rendezvous park $275. There are some too lows, but the interesting thing about that to me is that on all of these, people felt overwhelmingly that they had, or underwhelmingly, they had no opinion on the rental policies. So the rates stood out, but understanding how they're rented, what the process is, policies, etc., is really kind of seems a distant understanding to show this much in that way. So moving on to the community clubs, activities, and events. Are you involved in any Fort Clark Springs Association's community clubs currently? Check all that apply. As a member myself and still being sort of new here, I just didn't realize. I was surprised to see the gun club stick out so much. Oh, no.
This is Texas?
Well, I didn't know, because I can hear the guns from my house. I just still haven't made my way over there. I might want to join. But oops, let's see. This is my son's computer, or being used by my son, so I'm a little unfamiliar with it. So, and then there were some others, but Historical Society, Garden Club, Community Council were obviously strong answers here. And then what activities do you participate in? The RV park breakfast, movie nights, potluck dinner, fitness classes, some others, and Dutch oven workshops. And the others were just sort of like one-off activities that weren't heavily represented, so. Are there any activities that you would like to see offered? This was great. So theater performances, more historical offerings, yoga, dark sky parties, all of those showed up strongly. And then member networking, film offerings, music, culinary classes, lots of opportunities for activities. But certainly the theater, dark sky, and historical offerings were strong. Would you like to see more emphasis on the following? 4th of July, Independence Day was a strong response here, and then military holidays and Christmas sort of followed that. Halloween, Dia de los Muertos was lower, although that's probably there's some presence of that, or some emphasis already. So Easter, Memorial Day, Thanksgiving, seasonal events, community clubs. What type of events would you like to see more of in the future? Farmers market was the strongest response here. I think Jacqueline's working on that for Clark Days, right? So that's exciting. So that will maybe be a kickoff. Theater, car show events, craft fairs, golf cart parades, cultural events. I think there's a strong feeling of wanting more activities. So.
Hey, Annabelle, I have a question about the theater part. Are we talking about just utilizing the theater in general, or is there specifics that people are looking for?
There were some specifics in the responses. Utilizing the theater in general, movie nights, and then also the Old Quarry Amphitheater came up, several times as theatrical performances and people wanting to see that.
Cool.
And the Old Quarry Society is still, I think they're trying to bring it back, but
Yes.
I think a lot of people think of that when they think of their
Right.
performances, because they used to do a lot of plays
Okay.
and stuff.
Well, where do I sign up for that?
You can try out right here.
Cool. I have a monologue.
Marilyn McNerlin is the,
Okay.
I can get you her.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Of the changes and capital improvements you indicated you would like to see take place at Fort Clark Springs, please rank the most urgent or most important changes in order of importance. So here we see that was where I was referring to the tennis court. But Dickman Hall and pool, pretty strong. Restaurants, trees, golf course, roads, better. Park, landscape. Again, kind of that same theme. And then describe your short-term goals and vision for Fort Clark Springs. And again, these are just the words, so these do get into a little bit more subjective and longer paragraph responses, but the words I think paint at least a picture of these. So members, pool, better, clean, amenities, and then long-term goals, community, roads, fort, clean, buildings, improve, restaurant, place, maintenance, keep. More nostalgia there, I think. How would you describe the ideal future for the Fort Clark Springs community? I personally like that the community for long-term and future is heavily represented there. Clean, good, welcoming place, live. And then which three statements do you feel most strongly about? The strongest response here was that we envision the community as a desirable place to live that we are all proud to call home. And after that, we wish to cooperate with our neighbors and association to uphold and grow the value of our properties. And then we value quality management service at affordable rates. So it seems to represent that, you know, people understand it's gonna take working with neighbors and association to grow the value while still providing affordable rates. So that's nice to know, and understand. And then we move into marketing. Do you think marketing should be a critical task of Fort Clark Springs Association? And overwhelmingly less, yes, absolutely. And how do you find out about any local events and activities? Check all that apply. This was word of mouth and dispatch emails. And then again, we see the Facebook lot owners group represented more strongly than the Fort Clark Springs Association group. So that may be something to just discuss and kind of evaluate how that might be utilized to help with communication. Although, and the dispatch emails, this is great. People are reading them, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to enhance the structure and the timing and of that, because if they are reading them, that's very helpful, but there's still a lot of information that people are missing. So there's a gap there that I think is a really great opportunity an easy opportunity to fill. How do you feel about the level of communication from Fort Clark Springs? Which again, goes back to that same sentiment that if they're reading the emails and not getting the information that they feel, you know, that we feel we need or would like, but that is one of their primary sources of information, and they still think it's not enough. So I think there's a way to.
I have a little bit of feedback on that one. So the first two questions when I was reading through the survey and responding were relating to marketing, and then when it came down to communication, I think I actually put a comment in somewhere in the section, because my concern was, we were just talking about marketing, now you're asking about communication. Personally, I think the level of communication from the Fort about things that are going on and meetings and all that is exceptional, but if we talk about marketing, then my response, if the communication is referring to marketing, which is more sales and advertising, then obviously the answer is going to be no. So on this one, I felt like it was a little bit ambiguous, and your results might be skewed here a little bit. So,
and that's something to consider, certainly. You know, I think that, you know, marketing and communication go hand in hand, though, and the members are and should be one of the target audiences for the association to be communicated with, and so I think that's. It does overlap, but it's definitely something to consider moving forward. And as we think about this, let's see. Please check your top 5 marketing priorities. The website is an interesting topic here in the next few sections, because the responses seem to somewhat contradict each other, but that is the top 5 marketing priority. Improved communication, again going back to that same thought, and then travel visitor guides is something that people would really like to see, and social media. So, which is again something to consider when their primary source of information, or one of the top sources, is those 2 Facebook groups, the non-Fort one and the Fort one. So, but they'd like to see social media increase. So,
Well, but that would also probably like include Instagram and.
Sure.
So,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And you know, and again, goes back to Brittany's point, like if it's outbound marketing and targeted at tourists and visitors, or is it just member communications and all of that. So, how would you rate the Fort Clark Springs website currently? 4.7, which that's out of 10 for some reason, so I apologize. But how often do you visit the website? Sometimes. And then I was surprised to see that they are typically able, sometimes or always able, to find what they're looking for, but then going over here, the urgency of an updated website, again, is pretty strong. So I would agree with that personally, but,
I can offer some insight on that because I think we're revisiting that topic that you're talking about. As an audience, we have two separate audiences. We have the membership, where there may be good communication in the membership, but then you have people who understand maybe there's a bigger picture and we want to be marketing to guests and visitors, right? So we're kind of splitting hairs there a little bit. For me personally, answering regarding the website, I do think it needs an update from a marketing sales standpoint. However, I, as a member, only go to the website frequently to find like membership documents, which I can find easily.
Right.
So that might be why you're kind of getting those responses that seem to contradict themselves.
yes, and I think that's absolutely a part of the,
The best part of the website is the documents, I think.
I agree.
I don't look at the rest.
Well, it's true, and the rest is, you know, needs some updating and,
Update.
and, just the content and documents, or just the content, I guess, for the amenities and all of the other information, but the documents themselves are pretty, evergreen, so they stay there, and it is easy to find, although I think, again, you know, it just, yes, the results paint a different picture, but it is interesting to consider and worth digging into a little bit more deeply when we actually, if that becomes part of the plan. So, but that will also, Concierge Plus will also address a lot of that as well. So there will be an internal
You'll address
site.
all the documents that we'll be able to take, because we wanted to take those off the website.
Off the web? Oh, okay. Oh, it'll be a lot, okay.
We realized the website's split into two areas, one for news and one
Yeah.
for tourism, so it's being split off.
That'll be good. I would describe Fort Clark Springs atmosphere. Name 3 words. So again, this is the first word, the second line is the second word, and the third line is the third word, and you see a lot of these repeated. So friendly, quiet, peaceful, beautiful, clean, follows that same theme. What do you hope visitors feel when they think about Fort Clark Springs? Friendly, welcomed, peaceful visit, want, history, come back, relaxed, want to return, oasis. This is a little bit more for the, you know, kind of the branding elements and moving forward with the brand standard and just establishing kind of some more visual elements. But what colors do you think represent Fort Clark Springs? And this is great, red, white, blue. But of course, all of the colors that we see around the fort are represented here. So, and then what symbols, graphics, or images do you think most represent Fort Clark Springs? Cavalry, military, horse, flags, pool, water, statue.
Calvary or Calvary?
It should be cavalry.
But several people misspelled it, so.
It's been misspelled. We caught it when it went out for the brigade.
Yes, okay. So, in good company there.
Check.
This was interesting. Which era do you feel most connected to in Fort Clark Springs history? Which actually I'm realizing that we missed a previous era here, which I apologize. But we can say in the 20th century maybe. But the military fort strongly represented, and the current the Brown and Root days. We see a lot of there seems to be a lot of discussion about that. It was a beautiful era, but it's interesting that sort of bridges the gap between the military fort and the current, and was not strongly represented there. Tourism, how often do you have friends and family visit Fort Clark Springs? Most said a few times a year. Where do they stay when visiting? Most stay in their home, and then the Barracks Inn, and then some in short-term rentals. And then this other was interesting because most of it said short-term rentals or Airbnbs. So I think that might have just been a kind of confusion about what that was. But what do your out-of-town friends or family express most interest in seeing and experiencing locally when they visit? Pool, trails, golf course, wildlife, museum, fort. Again, kind of a common theme. Would you like to see tourism promoted for Fort Clark Springs? So I know there's been a lot of vocal comments about, not wanting tourism, and I think again, it's just about strategic growth in tourism because here we have a pretty strong showing that yes, we would like to actively promote tourism for Fort Clark Springs. So that may be something to just think about and understand how that is seen by the members and how that's communicated, if that's part of the plan. So. Do tourists play a role in the success of signature events such as Fort Clark Days? Yes, overwhelmingly. And what kind of opportunities would you like to see promoted for Fort Clark Springs to increase tourism? Ecotourism, nature tourism, heritage tourism, outdoor recreation, group retreats and family, and special events were the largest there, and then arts and culture and weddings. Of course, there are other types, but those are sort of the best fit. And of the following potential benefits of local tourism, this is the most exciting for me: historical preservation and improved community infrastructure, parks, recreation, roads, etc. So this was, historical preservation was 63%, and the improved community infrastructure was 57%, which is great to see that people responding understand that the economic impact of tourism will benefit through improved community infrastructure and historical preservation. So that is the overview of the quantitative data, and now I just want to kind of get your feelings about if there's anything that stood out or surprised you. I think largely it's much to be expected, but I'd be curious.
Yes, I'd like to kind of give you all a little bit of a historical perspective on this the situation here on the fort. I was raised here in Brackville, as most people know, and most of my experience on the fort as a kid, mind you, was during the guest ranch era, Brown and Root guest ranch era. And the only reason I was able to spend much time up here as a townie was the service club was a country club at that time, and my mother belonged to the country club. So I was, some summers I was able to use the pool, and I taught myself to swim in this pool. But the thing with Brown and Root is they had, even in the 50s, they were a very wealthy government contractor, probably built half of the military places in this country and around the world. They were super wealthy. So they had all kinds of money. This was for their executives and their employees. And man, they didn't have, I don't think they even had to bother about discussing a budget. Everything was kept in top-notch shape, unlimited amount of support and money and stuff. But then the other point is, we worried about this place going away. Well, if tomorrow, Fort Clark Springs Association, if it went dead broke tomorrow, I guarantee you, with the spring and the pool, and the amount of historic buildings that are on this place, that I guarantee you somebody would be coming in here, some developer would be coming in here so fast it would make your head spin. Because this place is not gonna just go away, it's not gonna, because it's just, as long as we halfway keep it up, it's gonna be here, and it's very unique, and I don't think people realize how unique it really is. But it's just, we don't really realize the importance of how we need to keep it up. If we don't keep it up, we just let all these buildings go. Brown Root, they tore down almost all the wooden buildings on the fort and recycled everything in them for their own benefit, naturally. But they were not dumb enough to start tearing down these historic stone buildings, thank God. But it's gonna be here, and it's gonna be used by somebody, whether it's us. Now, we have some legal rights here as members probably, but